Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we help you understand big financial reports without making your eyes glaze over. Today we're diving into an amended filing from Leader Funds Trust for their Leader Capital Short-Term High Yield Bond Fund and Leader Capital High Quality Income Fund. And let me tell you, there is a bit of a story here involving some restatements and a look back at performance that will make you do a double take. We might be looking at some interesting bond plays and how they are performing, so stick around to see what is really going on. And if you appreciate getting straight insights from corporate documents, make sure you are subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below, so join us there to chat more about these filings and other financial deep dives. This filing is an amendment to a previous report to fix some numbers for the year that ended in July 2024. Specifically, they are restating the financial statements for the Leader Capital Short-Term High Yield Bond Fund to fix some valuation issues they are calling it the restated fund, and it really highlights how important getting the numbers right is for these companies. They are also giving us a look at their portfolio as of the 31st of June. 2024 for both the high yield bond fund and the high quality income fund, so we can see exactly where their money is invested. First up, let's look at how the Leader Capital short-term high yield bond fund investor class has done over a decade, starting with 10,000 on the 31st of July 2014. It grew to over 12,000 by the 31st of July 2024. That's a decent growth, not spectacular, but a steady climb, and importantly, it beat its benchmark, the ICE Bank of America 1-3 year. US Corp Goft Index, which also grew, but at a slightly slower pace, the investor class fund gained 24.20% in the last year, beating the index's 5.72%. Significantly, the 5-year return for the fund was 3.68% compared to the index at 1.51%, showing its resilience over a longer period, and over 10 years the fund returned 1.87%, while the index returned 1.49%, so it has outperformed over the long run too. This suggests that despite the restatement we are about to discuss, the fund has managed to deliver value to its investors over time. Now let's look at the institutional class of the short-term high-yield bond fund, starting with 100,000 on the 31st of July 2014. It has grown to an impressive 124,311 by the 31st of July 2024. That is a solid return, and again it outperformed its benchmark, the ICE Bank of America 1-3 year US Corp Goft Index for the 10-year period, with the fund showing a 2.20% return versus the index figure of 1.49%. In the last year, the institutional class returned 22.36%, which is strong but lower than the investor class returns for the same period. And over 5 years, this class returned 3.80% compared to the index's 1.51%, showing stronger performance than its investor class counterpart over this medium-term horizon. Before we get to the juicy details of the investments, let's see how big these funds are. The Leader Capital Short-Term High Yield Bond Fund and the Leader Capital High Quality Income Fund together have a massive fund size of $184 million, which is a lot of money. They hold 64 investments in the high yield fund and 165 in the high quality fund and the portfolio turn. Overrate is quite high at 225.68% for both funds, which means they are actively trading assets in the portfolio. Now for the really interesting part, what are they investing in? The top asset class by a huge margin for both funds is collateralized loan obligations, or CLOs, making up 88.40% of net assets in the high yield fund and 79.80% in the high quality income fund. This means the funds are heavily invested in pools of core. Portrait loans, which can be risky but also offer high returns. The top holdings list for the high yield fund is dominated by these CLOs showing names like Parallel 2021-1 Ltd and Invesco CLO 2022-1 A Ltd. These are complex financial instruments, and their performance is key to the fund's overall success. A notable contributor to performance for the high yield fund was New York Community Bancorp Inc., but it also appears as a top holding at 4.62%. This is a publicly traded bank, and its performance ties into the broader financial sector performance. They also mentioned VTB Bank PJC via Eurasia DAC as a detractor and a non-income. E-producing security, this Russian bank has been under sanctions since 2022, so its inclusion on a detractor list of a fund that is supposed to be managed so carefully is interesting. Now we're getting to the core of why this filing is amended. There was a valuation error related to a corporate bond issued by VTB Bank Public Joint Stock Company. This VTB bond was affected by economic sanctions imposed because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The error started around February 2022 and continued until August 2024, which is a pretty long time to have an incorrect valuation on a major holding. This meant the fund's net asset value, or NAV, was not accurate. During this period, which affected the price at which shareholders bought and sold shares, The advisor is now reimbursing the fund $1,162,979, which is a significant amount to cover the harm caused by this mispricing. Let's look at some of the specific investments that fell into level 3 of fair value measurement for the high yield fund. These are investments where market prices are not readily available, and fair value is determined using models and management judgment. The portfolio shows holdings in Eaton Vance Senior Floating Rate Trust and VTB Bank PJSC via your Asia DAC for the Vulture Bond, and a Boxable Inc. For the High Quality Income Fund, the fact that these had to be valued using level 3 inputs and were then subject to a restatement tells us these are not straightforward investments and carry inherent risks. Finally, let's look at the financial statements and how the funds performed overall. The Leader Capital Short-Term High Yield Bond Fund reported a net investment income of $5,579,184 for the year ending the 31st of July 2024, which is a good increase from the previous very short period ended the 31st of July 2023. The Leader Capital High Quality Income Fund, however, had a much larger net investment income of $37,542,721 for the same period. These numbers show the income generating potential of these funds. On the realized gains and losses side, the High Yield Fund had a net realized gain of $1,762,359 for the year ending the 31st of July 2024, which is a positive sign after a net realized loss in the prior periods. For the High Quality Income Fund, we see a large net realized loss of $5,607,378, which is a bit concerning despite the strong income generated by the fund. As we mentioned before, a huge chunk of both funds' assets are in CLOs, and this is reflected in the total investments line for the High Yield Bond Fund total investments. At fair value reached $104,17,1723, and for the High Quality Income Fund, it was a staggering $889,217,055. This heavy allocation to CLOs is a key strategy, but also a point of concentration risk. These investment schedules show the breakdown of what the funds actually hold for the High Yield Bond Fund. Top 10 holdings include New York Community Bank Corp. Inc. and First American Government Obligations Fund Class X, and a whole list of CLO variations. For the High Quality Income Fund, we see First American Government Obligations Fund Class X again, and United States Treasury Strip Principal, plus an investment in the short-term High Yield Bond Fund itself. This shows a strategy of not only investing in external assets, but also in affiliated funds within Leader Funds Trust. Looking at this filing overall, what we see is a fund that has historically performed decently, but experienced a significant issue with its valuation control, which required a restatement. The heavy reliance on CLOs is a clear strategy to generate higher yields, but it comes with its own set of risks, especially in a fluctuating interest rate environment. The fact that the advisor is stepping in to cover the restatement costs shows a commitment to making things right, but this event does raise questions about the robustness of their internal controls. For investors, understanding these CLOs and their underlying assets is crucial, and the performance trends suggest a fund that has generally kept pace or slightly outpaced its benchmark over the long haul, despite any recent hiccups. The High Quality Income Fund shows a more diversified portfolio with a significant portion in treasury strips and money market funds, indicating a more conservative approach compared to the High Yield Fund's heavy CLO concentration. Alright, that is our breakdown of Leader Funds Trust's latest filing. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching, see you next time.